bring in one of the country's most distinguished public servants right now. He has served 10 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives, was the White House Chief of Staff under President Clinton, and most recently served as the U.S. Defense Secretary after a 2-year run as the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. I'm pleased to welcome back to the program Secretary Leon Panetta. Secretary, good to see you.
Maria, nice to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with this Iran deal because we know that Iran has started testing these missiles. That was a specific requirement that it was not to have any activity in that regard when we signed this nuclear deal.
I think the United States and our allies have to be very tough on Iran with regards to enforcing the deal. If Iran keeps prodding and trying to test whether we're serious on the deal, this is a moment where we have to show resolve, and we have to show that we're not going to simply stand back and allow them to violate the terms of the agreement.
How do you do that? I mean, what is the practical response?
I think the practical response is to join with our allies who signed this deal and basically make very clear that this is not to be tolerated. I think, first of all, they've got to decide whether, in fact, this was a violation. But once they've made that decision, then they've got to take steps to go right to Iran and say, if you continue to do this, the deal is off.
Yeah, the other storyline to this is that the administration has now ended its effort to train Syrians to combat ISIS. The president came out with this plan to train Syrians for that exact reason. Get our allies in the region together, make sure this is a coordinated fight. And now he says we're ending the effort, and I was skeptical of the effort from the beginning. What do you think about this?
Well, I'm concerned that the headline is that we're just simply, walking away from the training aspect. I think what needs to be said is that we have a strategy to try to deal with Syria and make very clear to that, particularly with Putin having done what he's done in Syria. I think we've got to make clear what our mission is: to make sure Assad comes down, to make sure we defeat ISIS. Those are the missions that the president himself has defined. I think we've got to arm the Kurds. We've got to continue to try to arm those forces that are confronting Assad. We should provide a safe zone. And I do think we need to seriously look at a no-fly zone. All of those steps need to be taken to make very clear to the Russians that we're intent on fulfilling the mission that we have in Syria.
It doesn't feel like Russia, and certainly Vladimir Putin, is afraid of any of this. I mean, he looks like from afar he's basically pushing the president around. He inserted Russia in this fight in Syria all himself.
Look, there's no question that Putin, is trying to take advantage of the situation. He was able to push himself into the Ukraine. He's now trying to push himself into Syria. When you're dealing with a bully, you have to draw the line on the bully. And I think that's what the United States has to do right now. You can't simply sit back and hope that somehow the Russians are going to implode. This is obviously it's a risk on their part. But I don't think you just sit back and hope that somehow their effort is not going to succeed. I think you have to make sure that their effort does not exceed.
Isn't that what we're doing there? We're sitting back. We're not doing anything, are we?
Well, I think what I sense right now is there's a certain ambivalence as to how we're going to confront this situation. And I think what the president has to do is come forward with a very clear message as to what we're going to do in order to make sure that we fulfill our mission, regardless of what the Russians do.
Give me your broad assessment of the foreign policy strategy that the U.S. has undertaken. I mean, a lot of people call it leading from behind. Is that the way you would characterize it?
Well, this is a dangerous world right now. I mean, there are an awful lot of flashpoints in the world that we're confronting. We're in a war on terrorism. We're confronting Syria and Iraq and the Middle East and the chaos in the Middle East. We're dealing with the Russians who have started a new Cold War. We're dealing with China exercising territorial claims. We're dealing with the whole threat of cyber. This is a dangerous world, dealing with North Korea and the things that they're doing. So this is a moment in time where, frankly, the United States has to provide strong world leadership. I think what we've learned time and time again is if the United States does not lead, nobody else will.
And no one is leading, although some might say Russia is leading.
Well, Russia is trying to take advantage of the situation, and that's dangerous. It makes the world a more dangerous place.
Yeah. So the strategy going forward, what kind of changes would you like to see so that the U.S. can once again exert its leadership on the world stage?
I think the primary thing, particularly in the Middle East, is that we need an overarching strategy for the Middle East. We've been basically responding to the crisis of the moment. And I understand that. Look, I understand why the president wants to be cautious. We don't want to be trapped in another war in the Middle East. But that also doesn't mean that we can just stand back and hope for the best. I think we need a larger strategy, and that larger strategy means we need to maintain a strong defense presence in the Middle East. We need to expand our intelligence capability. We need to restore our relationship with Israel, because that's important to our intelligence and military capabilities. And we need to develop an Arab coalition force, a NATO-type force for the Arab countries, so that we can better coordinate the efforts in that region. Those are the steps that I would recommend.
Especially since many of our friends in the Arab world are actually upset with the United States. First, it was the red line that the president drew and never did anything about it in terms of Syria. And then it was not supporting the president of Egypt. And then it was pulling all the troops out. Which in fact made things worse.
I just came back from the Middle East a few weeks ago, and there's no question that there's a lot of concern about just exactly, what our overall strategy is.
Right.
But at the same time, I think, we continue to equip and to arm our Arab allies. They continue to try to fight back against ISIS. Saudi Arabia is trying to be involved in Yemen. We've got problems in Libya. We've got problems in Syria. We have problems in Iraq. They're concerned about Iran's influence in the region. This is a moment in time where I really do think we ought to put together a strong coalition of forces. They're ready for that. They want our leadership in that. We could form a joint command center to try to coordinate the efforts so that we can confront terrorism and we can confront the influence of Iran. Those are the steps that need to be taken.
No, the question I always ask is, why aren't we doing it? So, we talk about that. We've had this conversation before.